sir and other faculty members and dear residents. So, I'll be starting my presentation. So, this is a story of a 4-year-old girl from Pokhran, Rajasthan, who has presented to us in the month of July with complaints of fever, vomiting, headache, which was 2.5 months back when she came in July, and it lasted for 48 to 72 hours, and since then she had progressive deterioration in sensorium for 2 months, and abnormal movements of all 4 limbs had been trunk for 1 month. So this is, from this slide we will understand what has actually happened with her over the period of time when she presented to us. So she had fever for 2 days, high grade, which relieved with medication, and it was associated with URI. She also had 1 or 2 episodes of vomiting with that. And after 1 week of fever, she started having progressive neuropsychiatric manifestations, emotional lability, less interaction with parents, and by the 4th week of illness, she started having abnormal movements. For these complaints, at around 7th or 8th week of illness, they have referred to Umaid Hospital, and there the child was diagnosed as viral meningoencephalitis, and it was treated in the same lines. However, in view of no improvement by 9 or 10 weeks of illness, the parents went Lama from that hospital and landed up in pediatric emergency of AIIMS at around 10 weeks of illness. There was no history of seizures, no history of abnormal eye movements, no history of focal deficits, no history suggestive of any cranial nerve abnormality, and no history of any prior COVID exposure before onset of first symptoms. In our emergency, the child was in minimally conscious to vegetative state and having these continuous abnormal movements with a staring look, no response to sound or no response to any visual stimuli. And this type of abnormal movements she is continuously having, and there was no sleep-wake cycle. She is not sleeping at all from last around 2 weeks. Just with medications she used to go to sleep, and after when the medication effects wean off, the child again started having these movements. Past history not significant, no previous hospital admissions. Birth history, child was born to full-term normal vaginal delivery, cried immediately after birth, appropriate for gestational age, average size baby, their birth weight exactly was not known, no NICU admission, no neonatal jaundice or no respiratory distress at the time of birth. Immunization history, immunization till age, till she presented to us, 1.5 year booster pending, BCG scar was present. Developmental history, no delay in achievement of milestones till 4 years of age, and currently when she came, she has lost almost all the milestones. In gross motor, she hardly have any neck control, fine motor, no hand regard, language, no vocalization, social mother recognition is absent, vision, no fixation, hearing, no response to sound. So almost every milestone has been lost. Family history was not significant, and socio-economic status was not significant in this case. General examination, we could observe child was minimally conscious, continuous coriform movements were present, no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, edema, no dysmorphic features, and we could observe a peculiar type of movement, intermittent pelvic thrusting, which I will be showing in the next few slides. Vitals were stable, and anthropometry, there was nothing contributory. In systemic examination, in CNS examination, in higher mental functions, child was minimally conscious, coriform movements were present, continuous, intermittent pelvic thrusting, and oromotor dyskinesias were there. Pupils 2 mm reacting to light, fundus was normal, motor examination, generalized mild hypotonia is there. Power, anti-gravity movements were present, formal power testing could not be done. DTRs child was hyporeflexic, however reflexes could be elicitable. Plantars are flexor. Sensory and cerebellar functions could not be examined, and no signs of meningeal irritation. Respiratory system, CVS and per abdomen system was having normal examination, and there was nothing contributory. So in database, we have a 4-year girl child with a history of febrile illness, which was short illness, 2 to 3 days. And following that, after 1 or 2 weeks, she started having altered sensorium, behavioral abnormalities, emotional lability, and it developed around 3 to 4 weeks later movement disorder, peculiar kind of movement disorder, which was progressive and it is relentless, and the child is continuously having this type of movement disorder, which is not responding to any kind of treatment which has been received so far. Examination, child was encephalopathic, coriform movements were there, pelvic thrust, and child was hypotonic. So with this database, so we could made a syndromic diagnosis of acute encephalopathy with movement disorder with neuropsychiatric manifestations. And with this, keeping this mind, with prior knowledge and with this peculiar type of movements of pelvic thrusting and oromotor dyskinesias, we kept this possibility out of autoimmune encephalitis upfront, but we also kept differentials at admission. It could be just a post-encephalitis sequelae where the basal ganglia has been damaged by the viral encephalitis and the child is currently in sequelae. Then CNS vasculitis, which is a progressive kind of illness, which also we wanted to rule out. And it could be just a onset of neurodegenerative disorder, gray matter, and could be a rare neurometabolic disorder. So these are the admitting possibilities, but our first possibility in view of that peculiar pelvic thrusting movement, which is very, very sensitive to the diagnosis of autoimmune encephalitis, we have kept that up front. We have started investigating the child. The routine hemogram, LFT, RFT were normal. CSF was normal, essentially normal, not having any meningitis or encephalitic picture. Proteins were normal. So proteins were 24 milligram per deciliter. Sugars were normal in the CSF. And WBC, there were 3 cells, and it shows occasional lymphonuclear cells. ANA was normal, and so anti-TPO, TFT was also normal, and we also done USG pelvis for this child, as this kind of autoimmune encephalitis can be associated with underlying ovarian teratoma. Other investigation, the child brought an MRI with her and it was normal. It was discussed with Dr. Sarvesh also, and he said that there is nothing contributing in MRI. EEG was done, which is just shows generalized slowing with no epileptiform discharges. And because of a strong suspicion, we sent this autoimmune panel at the time of admission, which has turned out strongly positive. We usually send this type of investigations to NIMHANS. So we'll be discussing what this entity is and how this child behaved post coming to us in July. So this is the upcoming specialty at the time in around 2007-2008 when we started knowing about autoimmune encephalitis. Somewhere in 2007, first report of NMDR encephalitis was there. And since then, we see all over the world that more and more cases has been reported. But still, this is underdiagnosed and rare entity till now. So what is autoimmune encephalitis? Antibodies targeted against synaptic receptors and proteins, and which leads to disorder of memory, behavior, and cognition. This is a triad which happens in most of the patients with autoimmune encephalitis. There is rarely we can find some systemic manifestations. It is more of disorder of memory, behavior, cognition, and movement disorder, and progressive encephalopathy. It is a serious yet treatable immune-mediated neurological syndrome. If we diagnose and treat it early, the outcomes are very good. And previously, it has been believed that it is a demonic kind of possession, and it remained undiagnosed before 2010. It was thought of that it is some kind of viral encephalitis, and in India, most of this kind of children will receive anti-tubercular therapy. So autoimmune encephalitis can be due to 2 types antibodies targeted towards 2 types of antigens. One are cell surface antigens and one are intracellular antigens. So we can see this cell surface antigens, and these are some common cell surface antigens which we already have diagnosed syndromes, known syndromes. So NMDR encephalitis, which is the most common in children, EMPA receptor encephalitis, LG1 Caspar-2 receptor encephalitis, MOG and aquaporin 4, also known as neuromyelitis optica syndromes, and GABA. These are common in children, so that is why I have listed these 5, 6. Otherwise, there is a long list of these antigens, and which the child can develop antibodies against. And this is the list of intracellular antigens: anti-WHO, anti-MA2, and anti-GAD antibodies. So one thing we should understand that intracellular antigens are difficult to treat, difficult to target, as they are lying inside the cell. And extracellular antigens, if we treat early, the response is very good. This is the immunofluorescent image when we do cell-based assays. This type of pattern will appear in the NMDR encephalitis. And in intracellular antigens, this type of pattern appear. So in anti-NMDR encephalitis, we can understand as the prognosis is good if we give treatment early. Reversible neuronal injury is there, good recovery and good response to immunomodulation. And in intracellular antigens, if the antibodies are targeted against intracellular antigens, there is a risk of extensive tissue damage, poor recovery and poor response to immunomodulation. So when should we suspect autoimmune encephalitis? So diagnosis should be made when all the 3 of the following criteria are meeting. Subacute onset, which is defined by rapid progression of less than 3 months of working memory deficits, altered mental status, or psychiatric symptoms. At least one of the following: new focal CNS findings, seizures not explained by previously known seizure disorder, CSF pleocytosis. However, white blood cells are usually less than 200. MRI features suggestive of encephalitis. So, very interesting thing to know that NMDR encephalitis are mostly getting triggered by viral encephalitis. So, if you are finding some viral picture, classical picture like Japanese encephalitis, herpes encephalitis, and if you started treatment and the child is not responding, or have responded once for a short period and then again started deteriorating, so one should suspect post-infectious and trigger of NMDR encephalitis, which is very common occurrence. And there is reasonable exclusion of alternative causes. So always we should keep differentials and we should rule out before thinking this diagnosis. But we should not delay the treatment if the suspicion is strong. So we'll be discussing this. Is there any characteristic clinical pattern in autoimmune encephalitis? How common is autoimmune encephalitis? What is the pathogenesis? And what is the standard line of management? So this is the usual classical presentation, the way that this autoimmune encephalitis patients present. So there is a prodromal symptoms. There is a prodromal symptoms which lasts for 2 weeks. Then comes psychotic phase or behavioral phase in children, 7 to 21 days, and then unresponsive phase when the child goes in encephalopathy. And then comes the phase of movement disorder. Movement disorder, any kind of movement disorder can be present: coriform dystonia, athetosis, hemibellismus, all kind of movement disorders have been reported, and very peculiar pelvic thrusting kind of movement. If you see pelvic thrusting kind of movement in a patient who is encephalopathic and the MRI is normal, and with this preceding history of psychotic phase and unresponsive phase, the diagnosis is NMDR encephalitis. You can start treatment. Phases of anti-NMDA encephalitis, which we have discussed. So again, this viral prodrome, then this psychotic phase, movement disorder phase, and if we don't treat, they will either they will not survive, or even if they survive, they will have serious morbidity in form of behavioral, cognition, and motor disability. So these are the core features of autoimmune encephalitis: encephalopathy, speech disturbances, psychosis, sleep changes, extrapyramidal features, autonomic instability. 90% of patients develop at least 3 of the group of symptoms within 1 month of disease onset. And it is a multi-stage disease. We should be knowing that symptoms keep changing as the child is progressing. MRI is usually normal in up to 70% of cases, but one should not get misled with a classical MRI pattern of herpes encephalitis or Japanese encephalitis. If that encephalitis has happened 2 months back, the child has responded to treatment, and again after 3 to 4 weeks it started deteriorating, one should suspect occurrence of NMDR encephalitis. The definitive diagnosis can be made with CSF anti-NMDR antibodies. CSF should be sent, not serum, as serum will miss 15% of the cases. Sensitivity is around 85% in serum and 98% in CSF. CSF can also show this picture, which can mislead clinician towards the possibility of viral meningoencephalitis, of which it can show leukocytosis, it can show cells, but usually they are less than 200. With a lymphocytic predominance, elevated protein can be there, and CSF oligoclonal bands are sometimes positive. So, should we do repeat testing if we have given treatment and we want to know the response? So, no proven benefit in the literature of repeat testing. We should be following the child clinically, and if clinical recovery is good, we should think that episode is being treated. Management is strictly clinical based, not serology based. Tumor screening should be done especially if the child is around an adolescent age. So we can find around 6% prevalence is there of tumors, underlying tumors. More than 12 years, MRI abdomen and pelvis should be done about 6 monthly for 2 to 4 years. Adolescent females, most common underlying tumor is ovarian teratoma, and males, rare testicular cancer and thymomas. Treatment is usually a monophasic illness, but recurrences happens, and recurrences happens when autoimmunity has been set in without any trigger. So if it is spontaneous autoimmune encephalitis episode is there, these recurrences are very common. Clinical relapse happens in up to 1/3 of children. Immunotherapy and removal of trigger is the most important. If you identify some trigger, if you have to remove that trigger, like underlying malignancy. Protracted clinical course due to long-lived plasma cells in brain can be there if you don't treat the first episode aggressively. So this decision is strictly clinical when you should give next immunotherapy if the child is not responding. So this is a paper by Joseph Dalmau, and this Dr. Dalmau is the pioneer in the field of autoimmune encephalitis. First reports have been reported by Joseph Dalmau group, and he suggests that if no response is seen after 10 days of first immunotherapy, we should start second line therapy. I will be discussing what we did with this child and how the child responded. This is first line immunotherapy with pulse methylprednisolone, IVIG, plasma exchange. The second line immunotherapy consists of rituximab or cyclophosphamide, and alternates we can give tocilizumab or low dose interleukin 2. And steroid sparing agents are used if the child is getting again and again recurrences are there, like more than 2 recurrences, we should start on steroid sparing agents. Prognosis is excellent if identified and treated early. Mortality is there in less than 4% if treatment is given at the correct time. More than 80% have excellent outcome. Residual deficits will be there if immunotherapy has been started late, in form of execution abnormalities, organization skills, and visuomotor processing. What are the prognostic markers? So young age is a bad prognostic marker. Altered consciousness at the time of presentation. So if child is minimally conscious, vegetative, encephalopathic, this is a bad prognostic marker. ICU admission, requiring ICU admission, and delayed institution of immunotherapy. So what has happened with this child? So she came, and because of strong clinical suspicion, we have sent the NMDR antibodies, and we've started child on immunotherapy in form of IVIG and pulse methylprednisolone, and followed by oral steroids. And this report came after we have already finished this immunotherapy. And after this report came, around 10th day of hospital, 10th or 12th day of hospital stay, because the response was not good, we have given rituximab with 200 mg per meter square, 2 doses, 2 weeks apart. This is a protocol which we have also made here, and we have followed that in this child and other child who have presented to us in last 6 months. So at first discharge, the movements have decreased, but still the child is encephalopathic, not following commands, not having some visual orientation, and this is the pelvic thrusting kind of movement which has decreased at the time of first discharge, but still we can appreciate what is exactly this pelvic thrusting is. So this is a very peculiar kind of movement which we can see that only this pelvis part is moving, and this happens can happen for a whole day continuously. After 3 weeks of discharge, we again admitted this child for the next immunotherapy, as we know that this is a multi-stage process and the recovery should be complete before we decide to stop the immunotherapy. So child has improved, child started following some instructions, started sitting, but still she is having this non-purposeful movements, remains on her own, in her own world, doesn't respond to commands, and started standing also in this admission after 3 weeks of first discharge when we readmitted this child. So we have come till here, and at this admission, when we admitted this child, we have repeated CD20 levels, which was 0%, and the target CD20 levels when we give rituximab should be less than 1%. If it is more than 1%, we repeat the dose of rituximab. Otherwise, we can give a dose, repeat a dose of IVIG and repeat pulse, or we can use cyclophosphamide. So we decided to give IVIG again and repeat pulse methylprednisolone to this child, and this is at the time of second discharge, around second admission, and the child has improved remarkably, also developed some steroid phases because child is on long-term steroids, but improved remarkably at this point of time. But one should not be happy with this kind of improvement, so because motor improvement is not the one which we are targeting, we are also targeting the cognitive improvement. So we follow these children with modified Rankin scale and development quotient we do regularly. So what is modified Rankin scale? Score of 5 is severe disability, requires constant nursing and bedridden incontinent, and our target is to bring the child back to either 1 or 0. So no significant disability, able to carry out all her daily activities, or no symptoms. This is the final target of ours. And simultaneously, this overall development quotient should improve. So at admission, the MRS score was 5. Development quotient, there was no developmental milestones at that point of time. Everything was regressed. After 1 month, DQ was around 20%, and MRS score was around 3. After 2 months, MRS score was 1, and DQ's development quotient was 65. And last visit when she came around 1 week back, DQ was around 95, and MRS score was 0. So mother was extremely happy, and we made this video where the child is playing in the corridor in our ward. This is the videos we have asked yesterday from mother, from home she has sent. So now she can do all her daily activities, climb up, down, playing, and started going to school also. So this is the protocol we have made for treatment of this NMDR encephalitis, and we follow strictly this protocol, and all the checklist and monitoring things and admission checklist and monthly assessment checklist is there in this protocol, and we strictly follow this. With this case and this presentation, I want at least these messages should go with the audience. Clinical suspicion for autoimmune encephalitis is extremely important after ruling out other causes. Autoimmune encephalitis is a treatable cause. Dramatic response to immunotherapy in neuronal surface antibody syndromes is there if we give immunotherapy early. Neurological sequelae may persist even after treatment, adding to morbidity. Early immunotherapy is the most important thing. Cognitive outcomes should guide therapy, not just motor outcomes. Most of the people will think that if the child started running again, that improvement is proper, but we should be following the children, as otherwise they will be going into long-term morbidity, cognitive morbidity. So in last 6 months, our experience is we treated 3 kids with NMDR encephalitis with MRS score of 5. 2 are post-COVID and 1 is post-dengue NMDR encephalitis, and all 3 kids have recovered completely. And this is the consent form for images and videos, as I was asked in the last of my presentation in CGR that have you taken consent. So this we have made for taking consent for videos and images, and we get it signed whenever we are making videos and images from parents. So about the title which I have kept, so I have written a review article on this, and from there only I have taken this line, an unwanted wrinkle in a smooth narrative, as the child is growing completely fine and suddenly this illness strikes and there is a change in the story. And if somebody wants to know, learn about or in a dramatic way, they can see this beautiful movie which is based on a real story of Suzanne, who was working in New York Post as an editor. At around 20 years of age, she developed this illness in 2009 when the world was not knowing about this illness, and this is a story where parents have struggled, she has struggled, and nobody was understanding her illness, beautifully depicted in the movie. So I want to thank you all the residents, especially residents, because they work day in, day out, and faculties of Department of Pediatrics, Department of Radiodiagnosis, because we suspect all this entity, we wanted to rule out many things, and radiodiagnosis department is always ready to help. And in this child, we could give all this IVIG and all because of the help of hospital administration. We could give most of the treatment free of cost to this child. Thank you.
Thank you for a very lucid presentation on a very rare disorder. So I have 2 questions. One is very basic question, that to my mind that this was an upper motor neuron lesion. So why was there hypotonia? And second is that one of the manifestations of autoimmune encephalitis are psychiatric manifestations. So in a child who is about 4 years old, does it mean that a child of 4 years coming with any psychological or psychiatric manifestation, of necessity, it means that there is an underlying organic cause? Or are there any psychiatric illnesses which develop in a child of 4 years which do not have an organic cause?
Yes, sir. So regarding psychiatric symptoms in a 4-year-old, so if there is a history of regression, clear-cut regression, one should always rule out organic cause. And we find organic causes. We have seen children presenting as autistic features, and turned out to be NMDR positive or other autoimmune disorders. So autism is a very common disorder nowadays. We see day in and day out these kids. But if there is a prior normal development documented, everything was fine, and the child has regressed, then one should suspect this kind of disorders and look for them aggressively. Not only this kind of disorders, some autoimmune epilepsies are there where there are no clinical seizures. Only in sleep EEG you will find abnormalities, and they are totally treatable. Autoimmune epilepsies are there, like Landau-Kleffner syndrome and continuous spikes, wave discharges and slow wave sleep. There are 2 epileptic syndromes which mimic this regression and they can come with just psychiatric symptoms. And sir, second question was, first question was
Is that
hypotonia. Yes, sir. So this NMDA encephalitis is a functional basal ganglia disorder. So there is lot of movement disorder, behavioral abnormalities like Wilson disease you see, where basal ganglia is primarily involved. So that kind of disorder, functional disorder, there is no structural abnormality, but basal ganglia is functionally involved. That is why hypotonia is there, and tone is variable actually. So sometimes you will find hypotonia, sometimes can be hypertonia at the time of examination, but usually there will be hypotonia in these kids.
Wonderful presentations.
Thank you, sir.
You enlightened us, because as endocrinologist, almost every gland have the autoimmune phenomena, and the presentation may be the subclinical to the florid clinical. So what you have presented is a florid autoimmune encephalitis involving brainstem and connection. Hypotonia may be because of the cerebellum connections, which also causes hypotonia. So basically, since you are working in this area,
Yes, sir.
you have to now look at the spectrum of the NMDA encephalitis, which may be the minor movement disorder or psychotic manifestation to the florid one.
Yes, sir.
So keep on doing the work, keep it up, and probably, maybe after 4 or 5 years, you may be authority in the world, just like other author that who has given the florid things, but the minor thing is still we might be missing as suggested. So any unexplained neurological disease, you keep on doing the NMDA receptor in the CSF,
Yes, sir.
and you may be surprised that sometime you may find something which is still unexplained. And
Yes,
we see in the adult in my ward, I have seen the patients where the CSF was just like 100 cells, lymphocyte predominance, some movement disorders, altered sensorium, and definitely, as you pointed out, we are not finding anything on the MRI or anything, and it is tuberculosis.
Yes,
comes
sir.
to the mind, and
Yes,
we
sir.
start the tuberculosis. But with this your case,
Yes, sir.
I retrospectively see around 4 or 5 cases in the adult which might be autoimmune encephalitis.
Yes.
So we take the opinion of the neurologist also, and they also suspect it. But still, I think that we must go for the panel and try to diagnose these cases, and it has made me wiser. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
How is it different from the Japanese encephalitis and acute encephalitis syndrome?
yes, sir.
Does it come in a differential or it doesn't come in a differential?
Sir, encephalitis sequelae can come in a differential, especially Japanese encephalitis, because post-encephalitis, especially in Japanese encephalitis, basal ganglia is involved. They can behave in the same way. So I have myself reported one case is post-Japanese encephalitis and NMDA encephalitis, which was very interesting. The child had Japanese encephalitis, classical MRI changes, JE serology was positive, improved, went back at home. Improved means child became better, and ventilation was off, child was minimally conscious from vegetative or comatose position, and went back home and again started deteriorating, and there is worsening of movement disorder at home. So when that child presented to us at that time, first thing is to look in the neuroimaging that it could be just sequelae. Basal ganglia is completely damaged, gliosis is there, and now it is just sequelae. But when we repeated an MRI, those MRI changes which was there in the first, it was almost normalizing, and the child is deteriorating. At that time, we sent an NMDA panel. It was strongly positive, treated that child completely, and the child was recovered completely. So they can mimic, it should be ruled out.
They present with fever.
Yes, sir.
Encephalitis. JE also presents in a similar way.
Yes, sir.
Is it?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. AES, acute encephalitis syndrome, or whatever you call it, that also presents on the same. How do you differentiate between the three?
Yes, sir.
You're talking about the sequelae, right? This is because you've said time is important
Yes, sir.
to treat. Start the treatment early.
So, sir,
The outcome is good. So how do you differentiate between the three in the beginning to say that we'll be thinking about this, not JE? Because in every JE, or if you think that you're going to get a entire
Yes, sir.
test done, that's
Sir, subacute onset is the key. in this type of cases. So in any viral encephalitis, fever or that acute illness and then encephalopathy starts within 1 week. Most of the time within 24 to 48 hours. But in these cases, there is a prodrome which extends behavioral normality, psychosis, movement disorder, and then they can have seizures, encephalopathy. So this is the main differentiating point. It is strictly clinical points.
Thank you, Dr. Lokesh.
Yes, sir.
To bring this case in this forum, I want to ask how is it different than the adults? Because once we are seeing such cases with neurology more in last few years, unfortunately in most of cases the NMDA panel was not positive, and again the course was also difficult. So second question is, for how long to follow or give treatment with such children? Thank you.
So, sir, in adults also they behave similarly, and however, NMDR is you can find more cases in children age group, less than 18 years of age. But adults also it is there, and lot of reports come, and psychiatric like this type of history is there, and if you are suspecting strongly, so there is a like entity called seronegative autoimmune encephalitis. Even if NMDR is negative and if your suspicion is strong, you should treat, at least give first line of immunotherapy and see the response. And if the child is, if the individual is responding, then you can treat in the same line of autoimmune encephalitis. We have treated in AIIMS only a child with a post-trauma. He had a very bad trauma. There is a diffuse axonal injury. First ventilated, was comatose, vegetative state, then went shifted to ward from ICU, our pediatric ICU. In ward, we saw the deterioration, and parents were very categorical. The child was improving, and we again now he is not identifying us having this developed this movement disorder. Also, the child developed this oromotor kinesias. We strongly suspected NMDA. We sent NMDA, which was negative, but we treated in the same line, and the child is completely normal now. And that comes in follow-up. We treated this child in ward. So if the clinical suspicion is there and you rule out other infectious possibilities, at least infectious possibilities should be ruled out, and then there is no harm in trying one first-line immunotherapy. If there is a response, we can go ahead. So there is an entity, very well-known, reported seronegative autoimmune encephalitis, because lot of these antibodies are getting discovered in last 10 years. We don't know that there are new antibodies which we might discover, like there is MOG antibody which has just turned up in 2017, and now there is thousands of cases being reported in pediatric demyelination. Previously we all thought that all this demyelination is either ADEM or NMO or MS, future MS, but all these were MOG encephalitis, which was just discovered in 2017.
Thank you, Dr. Lokesh. It was beautiful, insightful, mesmerizing, and reassuring that the kids of Western Rajasthan are in safe hands and competent hands. My question is regarding rituximab. The usual protocol that we follow is either 375 milligram per meter square or the fixed dose. So you followed 200 milligram per meter square. So it's personal experience based,
yes,
or literature based, evidence based?
Yes. So in literature it is given 375 mg per meter square even in pediatric dose, pediatric age group. But in our experience, in my experience personally, with 200 mg per meter square, you can see that we acquired what we want to achieve, CD20 less than 1%. So that 200 is most of the time is enough. 200 mg per meter square. So why to give high doses? So this protocol we follow, and most of the children will respond.
Yeah, definitely it's very good actually. It will save the cost also.
Yes.
So the immune, we are also following some patients. So if we give very less doses, maybe 10 times or maybe 50 times less doses than the usual, the immune response is there. The immune response is definitely decreased.
Yes.
So the lab parameters are showing that. So if you are using biologic at very low dose, it can open a new future prospects.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you use a low dose,
Yes, sir.
you do it 2 weekly, and if you use 375, you still have 2 weekly, or you keep it 3 weekly?
Sir, it is 2 weekly only, but that is why we started using.
You don't change the.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.